Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. My name is Nick. You guys know I'm a big punk fan if you've been watching the show for a while at least. And so today I'm going to be talking about who I think are the 5 biggest punk bands of all time. Make sure you check out all the links down below. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, another one for the merch page. There's also links for the Spotify and Apple Music weekly playlist that we put together, and there's also a link for the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So I've been a big punk fan since I was a teenager. It's probably like fall, it's probably fall, winter of 1995. So late 1995, maybe early 1996 was, I think, the first time I listened to And Out Come the Wolves by Rancid. And really since then, I've been hooked. But I think even beyond that, listening to And Out Come the Wolves, I've been, I guess, maybe a casual fan of some of this stuff for years. I think the first time I listened to The Clash, I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. But, my progression through punk rock has definitely changed over the years from, The Clash through, Rancid and even a lot of the stuff that's going on today. But, I got to thinking, like, overall, like, if I had to sit down and pick 5 punk bands, who would I put on that list? I'll tell you, it was really hard to not have a 10 or 15 band list, but I narrowed it down to 5, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. There are quite a few punk bands that I decided to leave off my list that have been hugely important to me over my life, but I tried to kind of stay impartial when I put this list together and just kind of tried to look at influence and sales numbers and things like that. But bands like Dropkick Murphys, NoFX, Misfits have been huge to me. I already mentioned The Clash and even like Operation Ivy. Those 5 bands, to me personally, have been huge, and I guess I could have, I'm a huge MXPX fan. I didn't put them on the list either, but, like I said, I tried to kind of stay impartial, look at influence, look at longevity, look at the things they did throughout their career and overall sales. I don't really think I could have this discussion without this first band on the list, but that is the Ramones. Their debut album came out in 1976, and I think really since then, the Ramones have been kind of the big face of punk rock over, the next, 20, 25 years. And even more so than like the Sex Pistols. I know the Sex Pistols, were popular there for a bit, but, I've never been a big fan of the Sex Pistols. And yeah, they did have one big album, but I think the Ramones with their debut album with going on to Rocket to Russia and all the other stuff that they did through the 80s and even some of the stuff they did in the early 90s, I think their body of work overall, I think you couldn't talk about punk without having the Ramones, especially when you want to talk about pop punk. The Ramones were the founding fathers of pop punk. They're doing things a little differently than what some of the other bands in that late 70s punk scene were doing. But overall, they're a band I've loved for a really long time. And I think the Ramones were probably, definitely one of the first few punk bands I checked out. Another one of those bands that, I'd probably put up on like the Mount Rushmore of punk rock is definitely Bad Religion. And, I have to kind of be honest about Bad Religion. I didn't listen to them for a really, really long time. My friend Corey always tried to get me to check out their music, and I don't know why. I never had a really good reason not to listen to their stuff, but it's definitely been within the last few years. He actually sent me this copy of Suffer a few years ago for my birthday, and really ever since then, I've been hooked. I love a lot of their stuff. Even their, I think, Age of Unreason, I think, was their last album they had back in 2019. Even that is a fantastic album. Everything that they've done, I've been a big fan. I think Suffer, which was released back in '88, was like their big hit, or their big breakthrough, I think, to a lot of people. But, I've really loved all their stuff, everything I've listened to throughout their catalog. And, it's a band that has been hugely influential to not just punk music, since they kind of broke through, but really in rock music overall over the last, 20 or 30 years. I guess I should have said at the top, but there's no order to any of these 5 bands. Any of them could be 1 through 5. If I was going to put like a Mount Rushmore of punk rock together, well, I guess if Mount Rushmore had a fifth head, it would work. But anyway, these five bands in any order are definitely my favorites. And like I said, have all been hugely influential, over the last 40, 45 years. This next one, I couldn't talk about punk without this band, though. And of course, that is Ransom. They were born out of the ashes of Operation Ivy. Their first album was released back in 1993. And Out Come the Wolves, when it was released in 95, like I said, it was a huge album. And I think Life Won't Wait, actually, which was the album that came out after this, I think it actually charted a little bit better than Out Come the Wolves. Both of those albums, though, are great. And if you look at a lot of the top 10, top 20 punk albums of all time lists online, those two albums are typically somewhere, up towards the top. Rancid has been hugely influential over the last 20 or 25 years. Like I said, And Out Come the Wolves, Life Won't Wait, those are both great albums. Indestructible was a great album. Let the Dominoes Fall. Even though, critics weren't huge fans of that album, I really enjoyed that album. I think they've missed on the last couple of albums, but, they're a band that's, still out there today, still making great music. This next band is where I might get a little pushback from people, and I kind of get it, they haven't been around that long, especially when comparing to some of the other bands that I'm talking about. But I think they were hugely important when they were releasing, at least at the height of their career, when they were releasing their albums. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, I don't think there's a bigger band out there, especially in the punk world. Even in the rock world, they were one of the biggest bands in the world. And they really brought punk rock or pop punk, whatever you want to call it, to the mainstream. And of course, that is Blink-182. I know my fandom probably, colors my opinion a little bit, but, they're definitely one of my favorite bands of all time. But when Enema of the State was released back in 1999, it was a gigantic album. It was almost a daily occurrence. You turn on Total Request Live on MTV, and Blink-182 would be on there, running half naked or whatever they're doing. But like I said, Enema of the State was a huge album. They followed this up with Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, which was even a bigger album. And then, their Untitled album in 2003, which I think was kind of the pinnacle of their career. The band broke up for a little while after that. But, like I said, at least from the late 90s, through 2003 to 2005 period, Blink-182 was one of the biggest bands in the world, and it really kind of drew a lot of people from the mainstream to punk rock that probably would have never checked it out if it weren't for them. I think you can even look at the way that Travis Barker has been, revitalizing punk rock in the mainstream even today with a lot of the stuff he's been doing. So, it's a band that, like I said, I'll probably get some pushback, but I couldn't talk about punk without talking about Blink. And then last on my list is a band that I think really took a lot of those early influences, whether it was Ramones, The Clash, Operation Ivy, and kind of rolled it all up into what they were doing, and then kind of expanded on that. And has at least over the last 25 years or so, has been one of the biggest bands in the world. And of course, that band is Green Day. And Dookie, when this was released, it was an album that I listened to all the time. I had it on cassette. I'm pretty sure I wore that cassette out when I got into CDs after my senior year in high school. So it was probably 97 or 98 when I first finally started buying CDs. It was definitely one of the first CDs I bought. And I've really followed their career really ever since Dookie came out. I went back and checked out their, 1039 Smoothed Out Slappy Hours and Kerplunk, which is a lot of harder, I don't want to say harder, but definitely more straightforward kind of punk rock that they were doing before they got signed to a major label and released Dookie. And really kind of all throughout that late 90s, early 2000s period, they were doing just great stuff, even though they kind of went down a different path when it was with when they recorded Warning, which was a little bit more straightforward rock. And then, of course, American Idiot was a gigantic album that, really no one really saw a band like Green Day releasing. And that kind of just put them in the stratosphere as far as influence and a lot of the stuff that they've done ever since then. It's a band that, I don't think has really made a really bad album. And it, as far as influence goes, obviously when you look at record sales, you can't argue with what Green Day has done. And even with influence, they've influenced a lot of stuff that even outside of punk, even a lot of straightforward rock bands of that of the 2000s really give a lot of credit to Green Day for influencing them. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Like I said at the beginning, those are my top 5 punk bands of all time. It could have been even further. I could have went top 10, top 15, top 20, because there's just so many great punk bands out there over the last, 35, 40 years. But drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think, because I know everyone out there is going to have, very differing opinions when it comes to this topic. But let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. And that's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.